Hey guys, this is Nicole Van Tassel with I Explore Science, and I reached out a while ago about some upcoming trainings, and there was a lot of interest in exploration. So before we dive into creating explorations, I wanted to touch base on how we can use our current explorations or like what's already out there and adapt them to fit our phenomenon because really, all of the explorations, no matter what you develop, you're going to want to make sure you have that connection back to the phenomena. So, one of the values of using an anchor phenomenon is, one, engagement, making it relevant for students, getting them invested, allowing them to drive the storyline through their questions. But another really important, valuable part is that it creates cohesion in your unit so that students can understand how ideas and like content ideas connect to each other and also connect to the real world. And it pretty much creates like a story in your brain, a web of like these connections in your brain that allow your students to access that information more easily. So, you have better retention. And it just and really more deeply understand it, because otherwise you end up with these disparate facts or isolated ideas, and when students can't put them together, the understanding's not there. So I'm going to use some examples from the Curiosity Spark that's releasing for the Spark subscription November 1st. This is the rock files, and it's all about the phenomenon is what happened to the dinosaurs. Was it volcanism? Was it, I don't even know if I said that right. Was it an asteroid? Was it some combination? And while most resources, on the web and things like that say asteroid, like the asteroid is to blame, there are some scientists who are still really encouraging, I don't know, who are like very adamant that it should still be up to debate. And they believe some really extreme volcano explosions and eruptions over hundreds of thousands of years may actually have had a bigger role than everybody talks about. So anyway, so students dig into that kind of up in the air situation there, or that contention in science in this unit. So all of the resources are designed to really tie back to that phenomenon. And you can see, I'm going to use just a quick example so you can see what does it look like when a resource is really designed for a phenomenon. And you can see this one is very much designed for this phenomenon. The beginning part almost presents an investigative level phenomenon, slightly lower. So while the big anchor is like what happened to all these dinosaurs in general, we're zooming in a little bit. We're looking at Ankylosaurus, and we're wondering, why are there so few specimens of Ankylosaurus fossils? Like, why have they not been found so much? And it has to do with, I'm going to give you the answer, but it has to do with scientists believe that they lived in an area that was maybe not they don't really know, but some ideas are that they lived in an area that was maybe not as prone to allowing for fossilization to occur. So maybe less of those. Well, anyway, that's all you really need to know. But you can see that this is like very much designed to spark those questions about Ankylosaurus and like why those fossils did not form. And then we're getting into, okay, so how can we understand Earth's history through the fossil record? And again, it's like all about, digging into the fossil record, finding those fossils. It's learning stratigraphy from oldest rocks to youngest rocks, all of that. And then in the final discussion, so there's reflection questions in your exploration. So this is kind of getting ahead. But when you're designing an exploration, I always like to give students questions that allow them so organizers, you can see up here, there's lots of organizers to have them record their observations and their ideas. But then also some initial reflection questions so that they can start making meaning from the experience. But really, when you come back to, sorry, I'm going to scroll, I'm not really sure where it is. Okay, class discussions and analysis. So after the exploration, we always want to come back and we want to help our students make meaning. So this is like the explain phase of the 5E model if you're using that, or if you're not using this, like sense making, meaning making. And as a class, you want to go through that kind of those reflection questions, that activity, and make sure all students are walking away with the general science ideas you want them to know. But then you always want to come back to the phenomena. And this is where and how you can take a kind of generic activity and tie it back in. So you can see some of these questions are more generic, like how can studying rock layers just help scientists uncover Earth's history? but we're looking specifically examples from the investigation. Show me it. Show me how it can happen. But then we get into like, okay, ankylosaurus. What are some possible explanations? What did happen in this exploration that can help us explain our phenomenon? And then we could, take it further and tie back to, okay, so how can we use this information to understand our big anchor phenomenon? Now, again, this is a resource that was designed for a specific phenomenon, but what if you have a resource that's not? So I'm going to show you this one now. Oh, I need to switch my screen. Okay, so in this one, this was also designed for this phenomenon, but it's actually a pretty generic activity. So this activity is looking at the rock cycle and how rocks change into other rocks. So there is a pretty generic activity. I obviously made some significant tweaks to it. I made it my own and incorporated I did incorporate the anchor into this. But let's say you found that online activity where students oh wait, where is it? Sorry, they go through the rock cycle where they're like rolling dice or they're rolling sorry. There we go. Now I'm getting too far ahead. Okay. They're rolling dice and they're moving to different rocks. So I tried to be very specific when I was designing this, like you're a mineral on a rock at the bottom of a riverbed and you're going to, these plant roots are, and you're going to this place in the ocean, or you are moving to like this rock, this metamorphic rock inside this mountain or whatever. So I try to make it as specific as possible. But this is a pretty generic activity. There's several of these versions of this online where, again, not quite like mine, but there is several of these activities online. You may even have it in your classroom where students move through like the water cycle or move through the rock cycle or move through the carbon cycle or whatever, right? It's this general idea of like moving students around so they can understand the different places that these rocks and minerals can be found and how they move from one space to the next. So let's say you have that activity. How do you tie it to your phenomenon? And you can see what I did here. So initially, all you have to do is make some kind of connection. So when I'm thinking, okay, there's 3 types of rocks, how can I tie this to my anchor phenomenon about dinosaurs and their disappearance and rock strata and all of that? Okay, well, hey, we were studying dinosaurs by studying their fossils. Fossils are only found in pretty much sedimentary rocks. Like, why is that? There is our investigative phenomenon. So I went from, here's my exploration, moving through students through this rock cycle. Here's my content. It's not just the general rock cycle idea. That's what I'm focusing on. But now I need to find a way to connect it back to my phenomenon. And the way I chose to do that is simply by introducing this, like this idea or statistic. You could maybe find like a pie chart or something like that to do it with. I just did it with text very briefly because I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it. I just wanted to make that connection to my anchor. So in order to understand like Earth's history and how we can know what happens to the dinosaurs and why there's even some question about it, we need to understand like, okay, igneous rocks we can date. Sedimentary rocks are harder to date. Igneous rocks don't have fossils. Sedimentary rocks do have fossils. Like all of these pieces of the puzzle eventually are going to go towards students putting together a narrative about what happened in Earth's history and what happened to those dinosaurs and use evidence to do that. So we're just working on those separate pieces of that puzzle through our exploration. And the goal is to simply make some connection between our exploration and the example that, and our initial phenomenon. Now I am going to show you one last example, and this one is not designed for not at all designed for, for one of our curiosity sparks. And it is an older activity of mine. It is Lightwave Stations Lab. So this was an activity that I have used in my classes. It was before I was using phenomena well, so it's not tied to a phenomenon at all. So how do I tie this to a phenomenon? So I tied this to, or I provided it as a bonus activity as part of the Rising Tides storyline or curiosity spark, because when we're learning about the moon and we're learning about, just learning about the moon, let's say some students are wondering like, They want to know more about the moon, its formation, what it is, why it glows, so on and so forth. Okay, well, we can use why does the moon glow, and even why do we see it, in the sky, which ties to Earth, Sun, Moon system and all that, to I don't remember what I was saying. We can use that as the question, as the little mini phenomenon to address these light wave standards. So this activity, again, it was not designed for a specific phenomenon at all. You'll see it's just like a traditional lab, like place your pencil in the cup of water, move, slowly lower it towards the side, like complete the questions, whatever. And some of these have like hints, and then some are like total explorations, like just make guesses. Shine the light, make observations. So how could you tie this to your phenomenon, and how can you make sure it is like as cohesive a tie as you could get it? So a couple ways is you could take the lab and only focus on the parts that are, well, first of all, you introduce a phenomenon that relates. So our big phenomenon is rising tides and the Earth, Sun, Moon system. Part of that standard is like why the moon glows. I think it's part of there. It talks about like light reflecting from the sun's light reflecting off the moon. Okay, so here we go. Here's where we're gonna explain that part. So we have our question, why does the moon glow? That's the first connection. Now, how do we make it like so it's really cohesively connected? Some options are to eliminate the parts that are not relevant. So there is a station where we're looking at like the absorption. So we're looking at temperature of white paper and black paper and looking at that absorption. Even refraction probably is not relevant to why the moon glows at a middle school level. So maybe we don't do those parts. Maybe we only focus on the parts that are directly relevant and use that to understand like how the moon glows or why the moon glows. Maybe we do all of the parts. So that would be like one way even to scaffold it. Shorten the activity, simplify the activity, only focus on the parts that are relevant. And then in your discussion, when you come to the conclusion that light reflects or bounces off things, you can talk about how light reflects or bounces off the moon. Another option is to provide all of these stations, but then discuss with students which one do you think explains why the moon glows or why we see the moon. And so they have to identify like this evidence that I collected at these stations doesn't really explain my phenomenon, is not relevant, and this one is, and this explains it. And then I'm going to use my examples and my experiences at that lab station to explain my phenomenon. And so that's another, like that would be a more average or like more difficult like level of doing that. So you can, again, scaffold based on your needs, your time frames, your students' abilities, all of those things. But you can tailor kind of generic activities to really focus on what's relevant to your phenomenon, and then it's okay to let go of the rest. You don't have to do every single thing. And if you're like, okay, but wait, I'm supposed to teach this like temperature and absorption and things like that. You could ask yourself, is there a different unit that would tie into? Is there maybe like an energy resources one that I could tie it into? Or I don't know, maybe something about like climate and albedo and all of that. So you can ask yourself, like, is there a different place where this content is more relevant, and can I move it to that location? And can I focus this activity only on what's relevant for my phenomenon? So in general, when you have these generic activities, like we don't want you to recreate the wheel every single time you're developing a storyline or trying to create these units or anything like that. You can use what you have. You just have to make an effort, and you just have to, I guess, make like a concerted plan to create strong connections back to your phenomenon. Of course, it's awesome if you can find activities that are literally designed specifically for a phenomenon, but because it just makes the connecting process super easy. They give you the questions, all of that. That's what the Spark subscription is all about. But you can take the bonus activities in the Spark subscription, your own activities that you've done, activities from other websites, activities that you develop yourself, although if you're developing them, I guess, why wouldn't you just tie it to your phenomenon? But you can take those resources and you can still use them. You can still adapt them to work for your phenomena by simply making an investigative level connection, an investigative level phenomenon connection to it. So in rising tides, which is the Earth, Sun, Moon system, our question is, why does the moon glow at all? You could even do like, why is the moon glowing in the daytime? You could And with our journey through the rock cycle thing, you can tie it by just looking for that connection. Like, okay, some rock types, dating, whatever. I came up with fossils. Okay, this can explain why we find fossils where we find them, and in sedimentary rock. So you choose that investigative level phenomenon to make the connection for you. Most of the activity might be the typical general, ideally 3D exploration that you've been doing. And if it's not, that's okay sometimes too. Give yourself a break. You can always make improvements later. And then in the discussion, after you have really guide students to that understanding of the general idea, you want to come back to that phenomenon and make sure that students are taking what they learned in that activity and applying it to your investigative level phenomenon and your anchor phenomenon. So that's how you can pretty much take literally any activity that exists out there and make some tweaks to tie it into a unit you're developing or that you're using or whatever that has an anchor phenomenon, even if it wasn't like designed for that activity. Okay, so the next time we do a training, I'm not exactly sure when that will be, but we will look at some things that you can think about and some information about creating exploration, so creating three-dimensional explorations. But I wanted to put this first because it's important that your exploration is tying to your phenomena, whether you're adding that in after the fact, if it's already an existing exploration, or when we get to designing it, that you are considering that as you're designing it. If you guys have questions, let me know. Thanks for tuning in. I'm sure you're at school, but you can obviously catch this replay later. Have a good one. Oh, also, Spark subscription is open. So if you are interested, I will post the link in the comments, and it will open one more time this year, and then it will be closed for a few months. Or enrollment will be closed for a couple months. So I don't want to bug you guys during your holidays, so we're going to just knock it out before that. Okay, have a wonderful day.